Rhizosorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, Rhizosorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
Shaun Haney here with Real Agriculture, and it's time for another beef market update with Wasko, the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And how are we doing today on this Friday?
I am good. Thank you, Shaun.
Yeah, well, you know what? Hey, we're in mid-August here, and the cattle markets continue to provide a lot of excitement. What's happened this week in the cash market?
Well, you do. And of course, your show this week, you've been talking a lot about all these news stories that dominate the ag sector this week. And it's just, again, just a reminder how much outside news, tariff or trade news or supply impact news, because the markets are so strong, any little hiccup, if you will, really can send things off the rails. So we'll talk a little bit about, some of those things this week. But to start off, you're right. U.S. fed cattle markets were solid again this week. Some trade in Kansas yesterday at 237. That'll be quoted anywhere from steady to $2 higher. In Nebraska, we saw dress trade this week 5 delivered. That's going to be called steady to $5 higher than last week. So the market just continues to perform. As you say, we're at the middle of August today. The other piece, and this is kind of pre-Labor Day, so a bit of it's seasonal, but also it just continues to astound us at the levels it's at, is the beef wholesale market. So that choice cutout last night closed $14.85 higher than, also almost $15. 100 higher than last week. So we're now at $393.80 on the choice, and the select's $27 back.
Wow.
For those that weren't listening last week, it was up $17.50 last week. So this is a huge move as this shorter supply. So, packers are in the negative margin, so they've cut their kill. So the supply side is even tighter. And then on the flip side, demand continues to be absolutely amazing. There's some folks in the U.S. that are talking about what happened in July on the retail beef side was actually better, higher on the demand measurement than it was in June. So again, just demand continues to be amazing.
And that data is the data, but what's so odd is anecdotally, even when I talk to farmers, on the Farmer Rapid Fire on Thursdays, farmers will say, beef's pretty expensive. We're maybe eating a little bit less of it. But the data just continues to show that is not the case.
Partly right though, Shaun. We are eating a little bit less, but that's how the market's rationing that smaller supply. Prices have to get higher, right? So that, be careful how you word that, but that's exactly what happens. Prices go up, try to ration the smaller supply. That's a good demand story. It's still a good demand story.
I don't know if you have any comment on it, but I did hear something interesting yesterday about consumer selection of protein. And it was actually, I think it was on the Cow Guy Close that I heard this on rural radio, where there's a concern out there in the pork industry that as people shift out of beef, potentially because of cost, they skip pork and go right to poultry. Which I didn't know that was a thing, but there was definitely the analyst had some concern about that for the pork industry, which I thought was pretty
interesting.
Fascinating. Yeah,
unfortunate.
Yeah, exactly. But the pork producers are like, wait a minute, hold on here. Why don't jump over us? Okay, so Canadian markets, what happened?
Yeah, just locally, did want to mention this because good news here in Alberta as well. We had fed cattle up anywhere from $1 to $5 dressed from last week, so. Most of the trade was 505 to 506 delivered. And again, in Ontario, about steady with last week at 527 delivered on the dressed market. So solid markets any which way you look. I did want to talk just a wee bit about an update on the forward sales of feeder cattle and calves for fall delivery.
Yeah.
They've been active since May. We've talked about it quite a bit. But so far in 2025, here to the middle of August, we've already sold double the number of cattle on video or internet sales compared to a year ago, so double. And now that making up of the total auction market volume is 35%. Just for reference, Shaun, that was 15% last year. So that's how much more just in terms of relative size of the numbers moving through videos versus the physical auction market. And then just already this year, we've sold more on the video than we did all of last year already. So we're going to blow the numbers out of the water.
And we haven't even had the fall run yet.
Well, no, but I think there's quite a bit of the fall run happening on the video sale.
It's already being preloaded.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. I see.
Yeah. So we'll see. You're right. As time goes on, we'll see more through the cash markets, or through the physical markets, but still quite amazing numbers.
It does make you question kind of what happens with the potential business model for a lot of those auction markets that we see across Canada, across the United States, and obviously there's some there's changing business structures and the need to innovate, and really very much a challenge for some markets that have been around for a long time.
So I would just add this, Shaun, before we leave. It's another tool, though. Right?
Yeah.
And so this is another tool that they all can participate in, and many of them are. So it's another tool. It's a change. You're right, but it's another tool.
Yeah, very good point. Trade. What's happening there?
Well, we did get trade from StatsCan in terms of beef exports, and the same kind of overall trend in terms of imports as well. We did see June beef exports up 15%. There was more beef coming into Canada from U.S., Mexico, but on the flip side, more beef going to the U.S. and Mexico and Japan in June, up 13%. So all three countries were up, which is a little different from what we've been talking about. Interesting to just see when supplies are tight, products going to move where the money's making the most sense. On the import side, beef imports into Canada were up 35% in the month of July. And again, beef imports from U.S. were up 16%. So we've got increases going both directions. We've got cattle going both directions. You can't ever say, we do this or we do that. Beef and cattle flow to where the market makes the most sense.
I'm curious, and I'll ask you, but I'm curious about if we see over the coming months an increase in Brazilian imports, because the U.S. has put those tariffs on Brazil. There's a lot of concern that they get a lot of trim from Brazil. Curious if some of that makes its way to Canada and en route to the U.S. And that'd be something that the Canadian government's going to have to be aware of.
Yeah, we'll certainly be watching it. So far, the imports from offshore have been largely New Zealand. There was a big jump in New Zealand in July, and Australia, obviously. So behind that, smaller market imports from Uruguay and from Brazil. So yeah, we will, the federal government will certainly be watching those volumes as we go forward. But again, it's largely been Australia and New Zealand in terms of our trim market imports.
The other thing that is grabbing a lot of the attention this week is, and at the time of this interview, we haven't heard the announcement yet. We have rumors out there what it's going to be, but make sure you check out RealAgriculture.com over the weekend and get our cattle email that comes out on Mondays. Well, full details of Secretary Rollins is making an announcement relative to screwworm. This continues to be a big challenge, especially for those feeder imports into those southern U.S. feed yards.
Yeah. So yesterday, futures markets, cattle markets, especially feeder cattle markets, heard the rumor, thought it might be a reopening kind of story. I don't think it's going to be, like you say, well, the news this morning is pointing in a little different direction. It's more of an update on where things are at, I suspect. But the market yesterday was worried about it. Futures markets were off big time. And today, of course, now the word's getting out that no, it's more of an update. And so futures are back up again. So again, markets are well, first of all, they're overbought. So they're very responsive to what's going on in the marketplace in terms of news. And so this continues to be, as you say, a big news item because of the supply implications.
Earlier this week, I was talking to a rancher from Saskatchewan, and I said, the December live cattle future is like 230. Who just saying that handle still feels weird, Ann.
Yes, I know. And it's, as we get closer to it, it's feeling much more likely than we would have thought a few months ago.
Yeah, as one person described to me yesterday, the air is a little bit thin up here.
Good way to put it.
Risk management, though, right? Let's finish off on that. Risk management's key.
Yeah, at these kinds of levels, there's a pile of risk on the table. Yes, cattle inventory, your assets worth a pile of money, but that means a pile of risk. So that's why we tie risk management. This isn't the time to jump off that ship, if you will, right? This is the time to put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah, great stuff. And thanks so much for joining us here today for the Beef Market Update.
Okay, thanks, Shaun. Have a good day.